Hello and welcome back to the channel for some more Prime Cutz. And this time we've actually got a great fun little movie, Vamp from 1986. It's not one I've really heard of before, but it has the amazing Grace Jones in it, and she's fantastic as always, and we'll see her soon. It opens up immediately playing up to its kind of comedy value as we have this kind of forbidden scene, which is soon revealed to be a college initiation ceremony. Which, of course, quickly goes wrong as the ominous music is seen to be playing on a tape, which gets mangled, and we meet our two leads, Keith and AJ, who are kind of done with the ceremony of all of this nonsense, and basically just say to the fraternity, we'll get you beer and strippers for a party, and then you can let us in, rather than putting us through all of this nonsense. We get quite a good angle on AJ pretty much straight away as he starts complaining about his clothes. And what's fascinating is this kind of very early part of the film very much is the kind of classic college teen comedy. We have Robert Rossler as AJ. He's mostly notable sort of these days for appearing in Babylon 5's first season, and Chris Makepeace as Keith, who didn't really go on to do much after this, which is a shame because he's a very likable presence in the film. Anyway, the two guys go and sort of bargain with Duncan, who we saw there to get a car to drive to the next nearest city, as their college is kind of in a remote area. And Duncan's this kind of sleazy character who's desperate for people to pretend to be his friends. Anyway, so they have a bit of a sort of a drive around the city and end up in a somewhat kind of dodgy neighbourhood. Stop off in a sort of cafe. I like the touch here that's kind of starting to hint about things as you see the cafe owner kind of dressing up as a priest in the background. And then we meet Snow and his gang. Interesting thing here is my initial reaction was whether this is playing off the Lost Boys, but the Lost Boys wouldn't actually come out until the year after that. So I'm not sure who kind of developed that look first. Anyway, Keith and AJ get the better of that tussle in the cafe whilst Duncan hides in the bathroom. And of course we've had Snow and his gang kind of set up as being the primary antagonists, which we will soon find out they're not. Anyway, the guys find a strip club and we meet the amazing Sandy Barron as the club owner, who is a presence throughout the rest of the film. And then shortly thereafter, we're introduced to Katrina, Grace Jones. And Grace Jones essentially doing her Grace Jones thing. She's perfect for this kind of role because she already has that kind of otherworldly feel about her. Just her presence is always kind of, you know, slightly strange and mysterious, and she can be an unnerving character with not a lot of effort. Then we have Dee Dee Pfeiffer as Alison, who is somebody who's working in the club who knows Keith, but will not let on from where initially. Dee Dee Pfeiffer, known for lots of TV work, mainly in sitcoms sort of later on. Anyway, AJ gets backstage to meet Katrina to try and convince her to come and perform at the sorority house, but she seduces him, and then we get the twist we've been building up to, which is vampires, and AJ is seemingly killed. Cut back to the other two guys just kind of hanging around in the club. Vic, the club owner, pads things out a little bit. A little bit disturbed that they can't find AJ, Keith starts to ask around, which freaks out the club owner and the people in the club, because normally, the idea is they just attack and eat the people who are lonely or coming by themselves. But anyway, we get a kind of a relationship starting to build up between Keith and Alison, and she's keen to kind of help him out, although at this point she's still not letting on how she knows him. But whilst outside, Keith sees some kind of odd, strange behaviour with bodies simply being kind of traded around the back of the club. And we're starting to get this kind of motif that starts to build up through the film of the green and purple lighting, which helps to really kind of bring an otherworldly feel to the whole film. And it starts to make the whole thing feel more and more surreal, more and more kind of abstract. We then get the creepy little girl, as increasingly we're building up this sense of this whole kind of area of the city is just not right. Anyway, Keith and Alison head to where she's staying because she's saying that she can help him out with some information, find what's happened to AJ. And again, the hotel kind of clerk owner is making it feel weird. I like the sequence here where Vic is talking about wanting to move to Las Vegas to open up a big, posh, swanky club. Like, he has an ambition to own a big, nice club in LA. And I really like that, kind of adds an extra level of depth. Meanwhile, Duncan is still pretty much oblivious to the fact that weird things are going on. But Keith, having been now separated from Alison, encounters Snow and his gang again, and has to go running. And again, as you can see, like, the sort of green and reddish lighting is kind of really building up here. It makes it feel comic booky, which I think is probably the idea. It seems to be what they're going for, this horror comic kind of vibe. These sequences down in the sewers are fantastic. Like, the lighting on them is just amazing. I love it. Keith peeps out, and we get confirmation that the creepy girl from earlier is also a vampire. And as you can tell, like, the film is not going for all-out horror. It very much definitely falls in that horror comedy kind of vibe. Fleeing from the gang, Keith finally gets into a local dumpster where he finds, seemingly, AJ's body discarded. Freaking out, he's not sure what to do, gets attacked by a couple of the kind of locals again before trying to call the police and sort of tell them what's happening. Meanwhile, Vic is dealing with Katrina and trying to make sure that she doesn't flip out and just go around killing people now that there's a possibility that their operation might be rumbled. Duncan still pretty much oblivious to the fact that anything weird is going on. Kind of trying to mellow out and calm down, Keith takes to the bathroom, which many of us have seen in kind of clubs and pubs, a bit scary. But here, seemingly, is AJ alive and well. So the guys have an argument with Keith, kind of saying, how dare you go running off and make me panic like that, basically. And the police have arrived, kind of saying, look, stop wasting our time, you guys get out of town. Meanwhile, the denizens of the club look on and kind of know, we're okay, we're not rumbled here. And one of the dancers goes full vampire and attacks Keith. But AJ does eventually save him, although it is revealed that AJ himself now is also a vampire. And he's kind of struggling with his new vampire status and not harming Keith himself. And eventually AJ does end up trying to stake himself, but it doesn't quite work for quite humorous reasons. Keith slowly develops a bit of a plan as he's talking to Vic, who's kind of telling him, "Oh, you're not going to get out of here," and he convinces him to let him have a last drink. So Keith and Allison kind of spill it everywhere. It's quite slight, but I'm not sure it would go up in flames quite as dramatically as like this. Probably a lot of alcohol soaked into the carpet around here, I guess. So we cut to a gang trying to escape, and they manage to get into a car. They're on the run, but it's at this point that we find out that Duncan has actually been turned into a vampire by now. So the others crash the car, bail, and Duncan is exploded. Into the final stretch of the film, and we get this sequence where Snow and his gang encounter the vampires, but don't really know what they've encountered, and are kind of trying to stare them down. But of course it doesn't go well for them. We then find out that the big mystery of why Allison knows Keith goes back to a high school party and a game of spin the bottle, that she remembers kissing him and he doesn't remember her. But they go back down into the sewers, and they actually do find a nest of vampires. But that's a really cool sequence, and we're not going to show you any of that because it's just worth watching yourself. But during that, they get separated again, and Allison is grabbed by Katrina. So we have a big standoff moment. We have established earlier in the film that Keith is handy with the bow and arrows. That hasn't gone out of nowhere. But with Katrina advancing, a bit of handy sun, and she's done for. Still time for her skeleton to gesture her displeasure. It's revealed that AJ is still here and still going, and that's where we get the payoff of why he didn't die when he tried to stick himself earlier. And I quite like these gags here where he's talking about getting a night job and it'll all be fine. But yeah, and our two surviving leads head off into the distance. Yeah, Vamp, it's a really fun movie. Like I say, it doesn't go for the outright horror. It's definitely more on the comedy side of things, but it's not kind of crude comedy. A lot of the gags are quite smart. It looks stylish as well. So it's definitely one that I would recommend. And I will be back soon with some more on Prime Cutz as we find what's in Amazon Prime's vaults.